Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. In this video, we're going to talk about two things. Number one, how not to injure your biceps when you're training, and how to potentially maximize or create the greatest efficiency when you are training. So real quick, some basic anatomy on the biceps. I'm going to tell you why I'm doing this for you. I remember very clearly many years ago training with a buddy of mine, very strong, and we were doing incline um, chest press. Yeah, long time ago. Incline chest press. Now think about this. I'm talking to you about bicep training, but I'm going to give you a quick story about chest training. Oh, yeah. And you'll understand why. We were doing incline bench presses. He was using a fairly heavy weight. And as he came down into the negative part of the movement and he was ready to push up, heard a little bit of a pop. I heard the pop too because I'm spotting him. I hear this pop and he goes, and I pull the weight up and pull it back. And I'm like, what is going on? I'm thinking he must have tore his pecs, right? Because I've seen that any number of times when I've trained with folks, and I've seen it with other bodybuilders and power lifters where they get a pec tear. But I didn't see that because he wasn't in pain in his pec, but it was deeper in his shoulder. It was kind of odd, and I didn't know, I didn't really know what was going on, other than that he's in a lot of pain. He can't continue the movement at all. He goes to the doctor, gets an MRI done, right? That's what they're going to do. Turns out his bicep tendon, I believe it was the long head, if I remember correctly, but the long head of his bicep tendon had actually torn. It was under such great amount of stress while he was doing pec work that he actually wasn't a full tear, but just a partial tear of the long head of the bicep. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the anatomy here so you understand. Now, I'm not sure how many people actually know this, even trainers that should know this, but don't really apply it in their everyday training scenario with their clients. And the idea is that the bicep is basically a two-headed, meaning that it has 2 points to origin, 2 points of origin, and then a single, depending on how you look at it, a single insertion point into the radius, and then into the fascia also, but mainly into the radius bone of the forearm. So that's the insertion of the bicep, but it's a bicep, so it's got these two heads and therefore two tendinous origins, right? And I'm going to show you this just so you get a good idea of what we're talking about and why this is so important. So if you have a look here, you'll notice that here's your bicep in green and then your insertion down there. We're not worried about that so much. But here is where the problem occurred for my friend when he was doing his bench press. And by the way, you are doing this to your clients as well. You don't realize it, but you could be overworking and overtraining the biceps and causing fatigue issues in the bicep by doing a lot of work that stresses the shoulder joint, such as anterior, right? So pectoralis work, even deltoid, particularly anterior deltoid. So it's kind of two sides of the coin that we're dealing with. One is you could be doing too much and fatiguing people out and causing a potential injury. On the other hand, you could actually incorporate some of the information here to help you to train the biceps more effectively. So, and I'm giving you a story from way back when, but I've seen any number of partial tears and fatigue issues that are caused by, number one, doing too much bicep work itself. So literally fatiguing the bicep too much, and or combining that with too much pectoralis, right? Training the pecs too much or more than is necessary, and therefore fatiguing all of the soft tissue apparatus that we find in and around the shoulder joint. And you'll notice what I'm doing here. I'm showing you the shoulder joint itself. And then, of course, there is the shoulder girdle, which is the scapulo, right? Glenohumeral scapulo complex. So this is like the shoulder girdle. That's the movement protraction and retraction. But the shoulder joint here is where we can see a number of problems occurring. So real quick, anatomy. This guy right here, remember, it's the bicep. So it's a two-headed muscle, 1 and 2. One is known as the short head of the bicep right here. And the other is known as the long head. Why? Because the muscle itself and then its tendinous attachment is apparently lengthwise longer than the short head. And the reason is because the short head, the origin of the short head is in what we call the coracoid process. And this is really way at the tip of this bone. And by the way, the coracoid process, this bony protrusion, is part of your scapula. It's a really cool, mechanically very cool mechanism for ensuring proper biomechanics. So short head starts in the coracoid process, and that's the short head of the bicep right here. And you can see the long head of the bicep, this guy right here, funnels through this little groove, this groove in the humeral head, right? And then comes around into the what's called the glenoid, right? I think it's called the infraglenoid process. But the point is that it goes over the shoulder joint and then inserts right back on the very top, or the supra glenohumeral area right in here. So you guys can see this. This is the head of the humerus, right? And this is where it sits into the glenoid fossa, that we call it, of the scapula, and it comes up and over. Look at the size of that. Can you guys see the difference in the thickness of this component of the long head versus the thickness of the muscle and then the tendinous attachment in the short head? I don't want to go too much into the anatomy. I just want you to understand the short head of the bicep is a thicker tendinous attachment into a more straight line attachment into the coracoid process. The long head is a little bit more circuitous insertion up and over the head of the humeral head, up and into the glenoid, right up and over, so that it acts as a shoulder flexor as well as an elbow flexor. And that's what this is coming down to. Anytime look, you know what I'm talking about with, you do dumbbell curls. Isn't that how you train your biceps? And the answer is, well, yes. However, here's the key. So train your biceps, lots of dumbbell curls, right? Do them, do supinated to train the brachialis, pronated to train the brachialis, brachioradialis, that's fine. But keep in mind that a secondary and sometimes really important function of the biceps is to flex the shoulder. You can do this yourself. If you take your hand in a supinated position, put it out in front of you, just like this, right? And you can actually give yourself a little resistance. And if you try to flex the shoulder without bending the elbow, you're going to notice that the bicep tenses up. One is because of the tension generated at the elbow, but the other is because the bicep right now, look, if I just hold I can feel that my bicep is actually tight right now, because the biceps muscle not only is a elbow flexor, which is its primary kinesiological function, flex the elbow, it's also to flex the shoulder, right? And so the most effective position is in a externally rotated position versus internally rotated. Externally rotated position, you can lift a lot of weight. That's one of the reasons I see guys doing anterior lateral raises for their shoulders. You can get a little added benefit by supinating the wrist and pulling the dumbbells up like this, where you'll actually get a little bit additional assistance in your biceps. So what's the point? Is that when you're training your biceps, let me give you the things you can do to help, right? To get more out of your bicep training. A great exercise that I always used to do, because I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger do it way back in the late 70s, early 80s when I was starting to work out. I noticed Arnold used to do what's known as an incline dumbbell curl, and he'd sit on a bench that was inclined, so he was back. And what that did is it actually allowed the shoulder to go into an extended position. If you've ever done these before, you know what I'm talking about. When the dumbbells are hanging down and I don't want to move away from the microphone, right? But if you lie back like that, what does it do? Because both heads of the bicep insert base, well, one for sure, the long head inserts up and over the shoulder joint itself, it actually lengthens the bicep more before you've even started exercise. So you've increased the effective range of motion, and then you would come up to this position if you've ever seen it done. Again, I loved watching Arnold do it, right? Because he, massive biceps. So you can see how that exercise could be of benefit, but you got to be really careful when you do those. So you get the idea. Great exercise to add. Why? Because we know biomechanically you'll get an increased range of motion in the lengthened position of the bicep. You get that? So by doing arms back behind you in a shoulder extended position, what have you done? Because we know that the origin up here, if I pull my arm back a little bit further, it will lengthen, particularly the long head. It will lengthen the short head as well, but it will for sure lengthen the long head and give you a greater increased range of motion starting at the beginning of the exercise. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's a benefit to this. You can actually incorporate that. Another thing that I've always done with cables, for instance, for curls is I would have the cables directly behind me and I'd be able to do the curls from here to here. Why? Because I'm lengthening. But again, be very careful with how you do this with clients, because you could do the exact opposite, which is you could injure somebody. So what do you have to deal with from an injury perspective, right? Be very careful when you're doing your pec work. This is the other side of the coin. Benefits for your bicep because of the origin of those two insertions is you can increase the extension at the shoulder first to get a little bit more range of motion. But what's the opposite side of that? Well, the opposite side is that because it's a small, that long head tendon, very small relative to the short head tendon, that tendon and that area of the muscle can be put under undue stress, particularly when you're doing significantly heavy weights on the bench press. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the point is that when you're training people, you've got to keep these things in mind. It's one of the other reasons is why we don't bounce at the bottom of the exercise, because that increased immediate acute stress can actually tear the bicep, or at least that long head of the bicep tendon. And again, we've seen this happen any number of times where pop, and it's not the pecs, right? Or the positioning, right? Improper positioning of the shoulders. This is why when you're doing pec work, you're actually thinking about at least I am, I'm always thinking about the biceps and the anterior deltoid as well. And so when we do movement patterns that are uncomfortable, or when the feeling when you're training your pecs is not in the pecs themselves, but a client starts to feel them in the shoulder, it's not just the pecs that you're stressing or overstressing. That's one of the reasons why when we come down into these bottom positions, we don't go all the way down necessarily, do we? No. What we do is we make sure that the client is feeling it in their pecs, feeling it, yes, 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 yes. And then as you go down further and further and further, as those two heads of the biceps start to lengthen and lengthen and lengthen further and further, you're going to start to feel the stress go into the shoulder. It's not just ineffective, it is potentially very dangerous. And of course, trying to bounce and pop out of that could be the acute condition that causes that long head to tear partially or whatever. Whew, okay. So you get the idea. Benefits, right? You can do like an incline dumbbell curl, use cables, things like that. That can, if you extend the shoulder back a little bit further, you can increase the overall stress benefit to the bicep. But on the other side of the coin, you got to be really careful, particularly with exercises that are going to stress the anterior aspect of the shoulder when you're doing these particular exercises. Look, as always, be safe, be careful when you're training, folks, and yourself, of course, and make sure you're feeling it in the muscle. You're not feeling undue stress in the joints, right? That's one of the key takeaways from this. As always, I hope that this video is beneficial to you. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell. These videos come out every Saturday. Saturday morning, but hit the notification bell anyway. So just in case that changes or we have new material coming out, you know that it's coming out. Also, if you have not done so, Facebook, go to our Facebook page. We have a private study group in there that is designed to help all type of trainers, whether you're just studying to be a trainer, you're already a trainer. We're more than happy to help you out with that. Click the link below if you want more information on how to get into our online or our live 2-week live course that we hold in Atlanta, Georgia. The goal is to help you to become a certified and industry leading personal trainer. Any questions, let us know in the comment section below. We're here to help you out. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.